All right, now we're getting into the facts. So we have some idea as to what news value is, but how do we put that information together in a way that's going to make people read stories? Let's take a look at that. Fundamentally, as news reporters, what we're looking to convey to our readers is what happened, what is significant to them, what is it about a story that they need to get. And we need to write it in such a way that readers are compelled to read into our stories, that they get the information they need, and they're going to keep reading. Maybe it may just be a little bit, but they're going to read enough to get the information they need to be informed. So we work off this main idea, which I think this poem by Rudyard Kipling kind of gives you the idea of how we structure news. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and where and when and how and why and who. And I bet you too have heard of the who, what, when, where, why, and how of a story. And that's what we're going to build here. So the basic story, the basic news story is written in what we call the inverted pyramid. And what this means is we put that who, what, when, where, why, and how, or quite a bit of it, in the lead of the story, the very first paragraph. That's called a summary lead, and that tells us this is what the story is about. This is what you need to know. The next paragraph has the next most important information, and then the next most important information. And it goes down until we give people the least important information, maybe just some background, that if they're super interested, they're going to read that far, but a lot of people may not. So really, if they read the first paragraph, they know everything they need to know to get out of the story. We want to get people information as quickly as possible. A lot of people aren't going to read a ton to get to the news, and if they're not compelled, they're certainly not going to read. So we need to give them that information, and then editors need to be able to cut that off if there's any space constraints relatively easily and under deadlines. So we write the story in such a way that if it's cut from the bottom, the reader won't really miss anything. So first things first is we write the lead. Now, lead is spelled correctly, and we do it that way to separate it from lead, L-E-A-D, which it used to be we would set type in hot lead, and we actually use a term called leading to determine the space between the lines of a type. So we write lead this way, and it's really what makes the story news. It's telling the reader, this is what you need to know. This is what's interesting. This is what's newsworthy for you, right off the bat. Now, there may be more than one thing that's newsworthy, but you as the author are going to decide for the reader, hey, this is the most important thing. You're going to need to decide what comes first in the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Is it who or what? That's very often what comes before the when, and certainly it'll come before why and how. When is truthfully rarely the most important fact. The fact that something happens on a Thursday, not necessarily important, or it happened yesterday. It's more important to know what happened yesterday, and then we can get to that. You're going to use this as a framework for kind of building your interview questions and writing out the structure of your story. Now, we don't want to cram everything, so what we're looking to do is to get as much of the who, what, when, where, and why, and how in the lead as we need to keep the reader informed, to let them know the most important information, and some of that may filter over into the next paragraph, which is okay, as long as we're giving the reader as much information as we can in that opening paragraph. So again, I mentioned this is the summary lead. It's the name of that lead crafted from the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and this is what kicks off the inverted pyramid. Let's look at an example of the inverted pyramid at play, especially the lead. So here's an example of a news lead. The Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage across the United States Friday in a closely divided ruling that will stand as a milestone in its 226-year history. This comes from USA Today, of course, right after the same-sex marriage ruling. So I've broken out for you the who, what, when, where, why, and how. The who is the Supreme Court. And what did the Supreme Court do? It legalized same-sex marriage. When did it do that? On Friday. Where did it do that at the court? Now, the why is not necessarily clear in this lead, and that's okay. And then the how was in a closely divided ruling. So you can see how almost all of the key facts are here. The why, not necessarily important here. It's more important to know what happened. Here's another example of what we would call a follow-up lead. So 2 of the 24 people known to have been killed in the tornado that pulverized a suburb of Oklahoma City on Monday were infants, the local medical examiner's office announced Wednesday. Now the who in this case would be the medical examiner. The what is announced 2 of 24 people killed in a tornado were infants. When was Wednesday. Where was Oklahoma. Why, I'm not really sure. They may have just made the identifications or something like that. We'll probably get that in the next paragraph. And then the how, it It could be a press conference or interview. We'll also get that in the next graphs. You can see in this case we only have 4 of the 6, but we still get most of the information that we really need. The important thing here is to keep it short and keep it simple. So the lead should be no more than 1 sentence. 2 short sentences are better than 1 long, crowded, and confused sentence, but we really want to try to keep it tight. No longer than 20 or 30 words, but keep in mind even 10 to 20 words can be effective. So, just give the reader the least amount of information to give them the most amount of information, and that's going to help the reader get the news that they need.